would love to introduce our women's wear expert, Colleen Turner. She is a design director for women's apparel for the Pioneer Woman. Over the last 20 years, she has designed women's apparel for major brands and companies including Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's, Macy's, Catherine Malin-Bruno, the Kardashians and Rachel Zoe for QVC, Calvin Klein, Jordache, and most recently, the Pioneer Woman collection for Walmart. Colleen's current role at Earthbound is design director for the Pioneer Woman collection. Earthbound is an advertising and marketing firm holding fashion licenses. Their company motto is big agency thinking, small agency focus on building brands. Big box retailers such as Walmart, a $570 billion company operating in 4,000 US stores, hires Earthbound to launch, build, and establish DNA for their in-house brands. To name a few, some of Earthbound's brands include Time and True, Pioneer Woman Home, and Pioneer Woman Apparel, which is currently in launch and growth stages, Girl Scouts, Hallmark, and Ford Motor Companies. Designing the Pioneer Woman collection includes firstly working with Ree Drummond herself, the official Pioneer Woman, to establish color concept, trend, prints, and big ideas to register for apparel, shoes, handbags, sleepwear, outerwear, and mommy and me looks. It's a big undertaking. These categories complete the total solution dressing for the Pioneer Woman at Walmart. Prior to Earthbound, Colleen was working as Director of Design, Development, and Merchandising at Republic Clothing Group, which provided her with the opportunity to design and merchandise 5 different lines, including Catherine Malin-Bruno, across all categories of apparel business. She also helped launch the Catherine Malin-Bruno store within a store and Macy's and Lord & Taylor. This role enabled Colleen to spearhead seasonal offerings and ideation while working cross-functionally with buyers and retail stores, resulting in a 409% sales increase in 4 years. Really tremendous. Prior to RCG, Colleen was working for Macy's, a $26 billion company, directing the Bar 3 line. Macy's brought to light the importance of processes and key item strategies, delivering newness for the customer, as well as relying on the support of data and analytics. It is through this data that we can identify and grow businesses paired with our creative senses and intuition for the industry. Lastly, Colleen has had the good fortune of attending FIT here in New York and abroad in Polimoda in Florence, Italy, earning her degree in international fashion design. Attending Polimoda in 2001 was an exciting time because Polimoda, I don't know if I'm saying that right, sounds Italian.
Yeah.
Okay. Partnered with Tom Ford and Domenico Del Sol at Gucci in their Florence office. Please join me in welcoming Colleen to the stage.
Thank you for having me, Caroline.
Oh, thank you for coming.
I remember sitting through this class, so I'm excited to be here, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and it's a real honor because I feel like there's so many dynamic people in the fashion industry, and I want you to know that we all see them on social media and Instagram, and I never thought my career would take me where it did. I'm actually quite impressed that I'm even still in the industry because, as you guys all know, even as students, it is cutthroat out there. So I'm here to hopefully inspire you and tell you to stick with it and keep going and be tenacious.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly worked with a lot of the behemoths in the industry, from Macy's to Walmart. If you can work with them, you can work with anyone. For sure. So I love having an FIT alumni because we can hear all about how your experience here shaped where you went next. So I wonder if there's anything that you feel like happened while you were doing success.
Well, I first want to just give you a little background. I'm originally from New Hampshire, which is in New England. So it's now that I'm a parent, I can't believe that my parents let me move to New York City when I was 18 years old. I can't believe I'm still alive, but I have to say, the energy of the city, they always say like New York City is your campus. Like all the students were saying, you have museums, you have art galleries. I lived in Brooklyn for 20 years. There's so much, creative arts booming in Brooklyn and all over the city. My philosophy and advice is to take advantage of every opportunity. Whether it's a connection like today or any of these people on the guest list, like the next 20 guests, make sure you find them on LinkedIn, find them on social media, and stay in contact with them because it's a really rotating chair. So people kind of rotate from one business to the next, or they start their own company. And believe it or not, maybe your career will take you someplace else and you want to be in that specific industry they're in or that part of the fashion industry that they're in. You just have when I was sitting in your seat, I had no idea where my career was going to take me, but I knew the passion was there and I knew this is where I wanted to be. So just keep your ears and your eyes opened and take advantage of every opportunity. And I know this is like a silly quote, but I remember somebody said to me, nobody's going to come up in like the front row and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to move to Italy? Do you want to join the fashion program there? Or, hey, do you want to join the runway class? Or do you want to join the tailoring class? You really have to drive your own career. You have to be in that, front bus. You have to be the bus driver of your own career and make it happen. And I know this all sounds cliche, but it's the truth.
I love that. That's so true. And I think it does start to be a shift from where you were in elementary school to high school to, into college. Suddenly you have to be raising your own hand. Did you have a favorite course that you took? Maybe Spaces and Places?
I did love Faces and Places because I have found that really the real life experiences really impacted me so much more. Of course, I love living in Italy. We were so lucky to be able to, actually go to the Gucci. We actually went to Gucci where they were making the bags. We went to Ferragamo where they were making the shoes. And we had this one teacher in particular. She was the marketing director, and she was this really cool lady. And she made us think about the future. She put us in contact with all these great connections. This one lady specifically, her name is Faith Popcorn. She wrote a book called Dictionary of the Future. And it's funny to look back on that 20 years later. And 20 years ago when I was sitting in your seats, this sounds so silly because this is something that so happens every day in every single store. She would talk about things being exclusive and customization, like people would want to write their names or their colors on their bags or make everything unique and special. And I remember sitting in the class thinking, like, how is that going to happen? How are companies going to be able to produce so much customization and color and print? And how are these companies going to make money? And she'd also encourage us to go to stores. So when we were in Italy or Paris or Europe, wherever we were, there's a big store called Colette that unfortunately just went out of business. But they were the first to offer an art experience, whether it was like a partnership with a specific artist, offer like concerts in the store, really bringing people together. And I think the interesting thing now is 20 years later, I think that's kind of, even though they Colette spearheaded this concept, this is where the industry's headed, right? You don't just want to go into a store and just buy a dress or just buy a pair of jeans. You want a meeting place, you want to talk to people, you want to meet other local artists or to see what people are into, whether it's food, coffee. Sometimes it's now people are showing pet looks that match their outfits. The opportunities are mommy and me.
Yeah.
It's not just about apparel anymore. I think it's about finding that unique handle to set your store, make your store different. Now I have kids, so this, and I'm sure you will know this store too, but this store can't. This is a store that they came up where it's almost like where children can go in and play with the activities and then leave, purchase the activity. So same thing with like apparel. They want it to be much more interactive, much more.
There's a camp at Hudson Yards. You've been inside. I actually just assigned my morning class to go check it out. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a great concept. So it's just really about thinking outside of the box. But that's what FIT is. You guys are all creative people. This is a think tank. So talk to your peers, talk to your professors. Like really, your mind is a muscle. Like almost like yoga or working out. Like exercise your mind. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I remember sometimes I'd sit through classes and looking back on it in hindsight, I wish I would have asked 50 more questions in each class.
Yeah, it's true. It's the only way you're going to actually absorb it too is if you ask the questions that matter to you. There was an article on Business and Fashion just this week about how European department stores have fared so much better than U.S. department stores over the last few years. And really, it's because they had been so focused on the experience of the in-store, buy. When you walk Harrods and it just feels like you're walking amongst a number of different boutiques versus, when you walk at a Nordstrom, well, Nordstrom is a better job than most. But if you walk at a Macy's, a typical Macy's, not your own square Macy's, there's not much experience happening. There's not much that inspires people in the same way. And, people stop going back if there's nothing exciting.
Yeah, well, and they're not afraid to take risks. I think the American market is so much more safe. And it's exciting because Europe doesn't have as many rules, right? So they can take these, they can bring champagne into the store or...
Yeah. Did you have anything that you didn't like about your Italy experience?
Like most people, it's hard to be away from your family and your friends, but you always have to look at the positive and the negative. And the positive was the bond. I'm sure much like the bonds that you guys are creating in your classes or with your teachers, we were all there for the same reason. We all love fashion. We all wanted to take it all in. We wanted to travel, we wanted the food, we wanted the experience of the museums, and we were all there together and we only had each other. So it was nice because you got to meet different types of people from all over the world, because Polymoda was a real melting pot, much like New York is a melting pot, but just to have the global experience, I think was a really unique and special. And now it's exciting for me. At the time there wasn't Facebook and social media, so it was hard to stay connected with people. But it's really cool now to see where all these people have landed and kind of what they're doing with their career. And I would have never had these connections if it wasn't for this time in Italy together.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. So how did you get your first job out of school?
So since I'm old school, I got my first job by Women's Wear Daily, which is now a digital publication. I think it's still a paper, right? You can still purchase it. But everybody would have to flip to the back and go through all the ads, like whether it was like the New York Times, specifically Women's Wear Daily, and I just applied to every single job. Even if I wasn't qualified, I would, because sometimes somebody will write you back and maybe they'll call you back and you'll get an interview, maybe you don't get the job, but then next time they'll say, hey, you know, I love that you picked up the phone and called us, or that you sent your resume in. Maybe that wasn't the right role, but now we have something that came up for you. So you really just have to be courageous, authentic, and I know I keep using the word tenacious, but you really just have to go after it. There's also, at the time, the career office here at FIT, so I would go there like on a weekly basis, and also talk to your friends. Like I know whether they're interning at certain agencies or publications or design houses, go and speak with them, see if they can connect you with anybody. It's all about the human connection and reaching out.
Yeah. So your first job out of school was?
My first job out of school, the name of the company, we sold suits to Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's. And basically we were knocking off Chanel suits. So it was like for the lady at the time where people were still getting dressed up and they didn't want to spend $3,000 on a suit. But the cool thing was we were using similar fabrics to what Chanel was using. So we would go and obviously kind of put our own spin on them, redesign them, but we were using those high-end fabrics. So right now, just to give you an example, at mass market, when we produce something like, say that's 80,000 pieces, the fabric is $1 to $2 a yard. And these suits per yard, the fabric was anywhere from $30 to $50 a yard.
Wow.
So you can imagine if you work at like a high-end, like Oscar de Lorenzo or Vera Wang, any of these high-end designers, they can afford this expensive fabric. So I feel really unique to be able to work so closely and intimately with expensive fabric, because today most mass market jobs, the fabric is much less expensive, because that's what the mass market can afford, right? Nobody needs a $3,000 suit today.
Yeah.
At least I don't
No
think
one's
so.
wearing suits.
No, I
either,
know,
so
right?
there's that.
Which, that's a relief.
Can you take us through, the rest of your career path from there to?
Sure. So I was working in the company was called BGO, designing tailored women's suits for Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's, and Saks. And then from there, I was thinking that I wanted to get more. It was such a niche market, and like I said, not that many people were wearing these high-end suits, or I didn't know anybody that could afford them, and I really wanted to be in the mass market. I knew the mass market offered great benefits. It had a nice work-life balance. And I knew that it would also take you all over the world. So I really wanted to travel. So from there, I went to Macy's. I got a great job at Macy's working for a line called Style & Co. Style & Co. was one of their power brands. It was doing about $500 million a year. And it wasn't necessarily my taste level, but it was the experience alone. Through Macy's, I was able to go to Taiwan, Korea, pretty much all over the world. And then we were going to LA every other month. So that really opened up your eyes as far as like a global market, visiting the factories, designing for mass market. And the great thing about a huge behemoth company like a Macy's or a Target or a Walmart is that it's a real meeting of the minds. You're working with merchandising, designers, buyers, suppliers, factories. It all comes together and really tells this cohesive story. It seems a bit like poetry.
Yeah.
When you finally get that one garment after working on it for 8 months.
Yeah. Well, before you go ahead, what were you going to each of those cities for? Like, what would you go to LA for?
Sure, that's a great question. So there was Macy's. We ran private label, and for private label, there was 2 different ways to produce clothes. Even today, you can either go directly to the factory, so you could go direct. We would, as a Macy's designer, we could go to all of our different factories, release tech packs or sketches to them, and tell them exactly what we wanted and what our end result was. So that was one way to design. Another way was to reach out to the suppliers, such as like a supplier in LA, where they were kind of had their own designs or like their own in-house designs, and they would present them to us and say like, oh, I know you guys released 10 tech packs on these cut and sew tops, but you're missing this category. So they were kind of selling and designing, and also kind of we would give them our brand DNA, like what we stood for our brand, and then they would kind of present ideas to us to see like kind of how they fit
Fill
in.
in some holes
Yeah,
for you that you
exactly.
may have from their own factories.
Exactly.
Cool. And then you would be going overseas to Taiwan to check in on how everything was coming along.
Yes, and then we would follow up, so say we released like 50 tech packs for the season for each category. We would go and see if there's any hiccups in the production, negotiate the cost, so we'd sit there and maybe like change the buttons or change the zipper pulls or change the lengths, and we would sit there with we would partner with our product development people and look at the cost. So we just kept re-looking at the cost per minimums just to get the, because the name of the game is to get the cost down to offer the consumer like the best retail prices possible. So as a designer, it's like what can we remove and still not miss in the garment and still provide like the overall look for the customer.
Like, are you a little off track from Style & Co. You moved on to?
So from when I was at Macy's, I desired to work for like a younger, cooler brand. So when I was at Macy's, and that's the other great thing about working for a huge company, there's lots of opportunities. Say you wanted to work on menswear or hard goods, handbags. I really desired to work on something a little bit younger and cooler, and that's kind of how I ended up on the Bar 3 line. And the Bar 3 was like a young juniors contemporary line. So they were really, Macy's at the time, this was maybe 10 years ago, as everybody knows, but once social media took off, they're really trying to attract like a younger customer, you know, because they already own the market share of that Missy baby boomer. So they were really going after a younger customer, but they're still working on it, and it wasn't so much of a success.
I was competing against you at the same time because I was selling for Kenzie.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Which was on the same floor, and Bar 3 was killing it actually for a little bit there, but
well,
I don't know if it was the same time.
As you know, it's hard to get it right, and especially with the junior market, is there's not much loyalty, right? So it's all about like the best price, the best price they can get. They'll find it someplace else. It's all about getting the look. It's not necessarily about the brand. At least that's what I think now when I talk to the younger generation. That's what they say. Do you guys agree? Mm-hmm. So, do you guys feel like you're loyal to your brands that you shop?
Yeah.
Sounds 50-50.
There's a lot of thrifters in the room too.
Yeah.
I feel like that makes it so you can't be very loyal because you gotta go and live there.
Well, thrifting is the way to go. I mean, it's amazing. It's fun to dig and put together your own looks. And I think it was 10 years ago, Marc Jacobs had this amazing runway collection. It literally looked like he just thrifted all of New York City, and it was like it was like written up all over the press. It was like one of the best collections ever.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, another article that I read this week is about how Ralph Lauren collaborated with Depop to actually build out a line, and it seems to me like a win-win philosophy because if you get people who are selling on Depop or buying on Depop to buy the full price goods from Ralph Lauren, you know, it kind of all boats can rise. Which is,
yeah,
it's an
awesome.
interesting strategy for a full price brand. And the whole article was about how Ralph Lauren's actually doing better with their full price brand because they like embraced the thrift market, or was one of the reasons. Sorry. After Bar 3.
After Bar 3, I went to Republic Clothing Group, which is where, you know, it's interesting because I was in kind of more designer, I wanted to go to mass market, and then I wanted to go back to designer. So then I was approached by Republic Clothing Group to design their Catherine Malandrino line, which was an exciting time because Catherine Malandrino, I don't know if you guys know too much about her, but she's a French designer, and at the time she had a store in the meatpacking district. I think she had one in Soho, and she's a French woman, and her husband was the business partner. And unfortunately, their brand went bankrupt. But what happens with a lot of these brands is then they get bought by bigger companies. So my company, Republic Clothing Group, bought her, and then they basically take them to mass market. So they took them to they took them to Lord & Taylor, I know which is out of business now unfortunately, but Macy's. But they thought that there was this big void, not just my company, but this time in the market there was this kind of a middle price point that people wanted to go after. So not just Zara fast fashion and not high end, where people were paying like a little bit more money, say like $200 for a top and not just $20 from Zara. Of course that whole philosophy has changed too, but this was the direction about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Where people were looking.
Did you launch that brand?
I did help launch it, and then
Yeah.
they created like a store within a store. They created at Macy's. I'm sure if you guys have been to Macy's recently, they have little pods, and they call them like store within a stores, like to try to make it feel exclusive, to make it feel like, oh, you're really in a Calvin Klein or you're really in a Catherine Malandrino. Catherine Malandrino, that business is more like mass market now at TJ Maxx and Marmaxx, Marshalls, but at the time they were trying to launch this kind of young contemporary brand. And then from there, I was there, and as that business kind of dissolved, I had the opportunity at Republic Clothing Group to help launch other brands, which were also exciting, but it was more department stores. There were brands like this, I don't know if you guys would know this brand, but it's a store, it's called Steinmart, which is in Florida. It was bright, colorful, all these different, it was exciting because we would have all these different merchandisers come in and we would kind of shop our whole floor of our company. So since our company, we designed everything from cashmere sweaters to dresses. So the buyers would come in, and it was at this time, like 5 years, this was more like 3 years ago, they were buying less of a collection and more piece driven, where they wanted, say they see a void in woven tops, so they just go buy woven tops, or maybe it was sweaters at the time. So I think because the market has been so kind of unpredictable in the last 3 years, this gave buyers the opportunity to help grow their stores. And our company, Republic Clothing Group, how they won is they would take a position on something. So say if they really believed in a dress, the owner would go ahead and cut like 10,000 pieces of it, own the inventory, so that when the buyer came in, he could ship it in a week. But that's a lot of inventory that you know.
Yeah, wow. And that brings us to your current role.
Yep, so from there, you know, it's interesting because I'm like most of you guys, I'm sure you're all on LinkedIn. I was following this one company called Earthbound, and it was just really interesting to me because they were a marketing and advertising company with a fashion license. So I really wanted to kind of grow my fashion career. As you guys can see, I've worked in all different areas of the fashion industry, and I was really intrigued that they were marketing and advertising, and they just started to get this big brand called Time and True with Walmart, and the brand is a powerhouse. And what's happening right now at Walmart is trying to be like a Target. So if you go into Target, it feels really like cool, and they have all these young brands, and they have these little pods where you can buy like the sneakers, the shorts, the shoes, all for a great price, because people are really conscious of their dollar now. And why would you, if you could get the same, let's say Lululemon short for like $100 and the same thing at Target for $20, people are conscious now. They're obviously going to buy the less expensive short. So Walmart now is creating what they call a store of the future. So Walmart is a behemoth of a company. It's almost like $570 billion. And what happened, which is really interesting, is that during the pandemic, all retail stores were shutting down. Unfortunately, I was laid off at Republic Clothing Group, but one thing that happened during the pandemic is Walmart's and Target stayed open because they had grocery stores. So they could not shut down grocery stores because they were selling food. So what happened is, as people started to shop at Target and Walmart, they started looking at the clothes. So Target and Walmart has now attracted a whole new customer base. So it's going to be a long process, but they're in the process of changing over all the brands. The interesting thing is it's the same factories, it's the same qualities that people are using all across the market.
It's just they buy so many more units that they can get a much better price.
Right. And the new SVP of merchandising, she came from Nordstrom, so she is, really taking her, well, she's really has her hand in all the merchandising. She really wants to change the thought process of what people typically would think of a Walmart.
That's great. So when's your brand launch?
So our brand, the Pioneer Woman Apparel, what happened at Earthbound is they have a huge hard goods business. So they develop everything from like crock pots to spoons. I'm sure you guys are probably all wondering who Ree Drummond is. Does anybody know who Ree Drummond is? That's okay if you don't. So she basically is, she lives in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and she's a celebrity chef. She has red hair. So you guys will have to look her up.
The Pioneer.
Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't actually.
Yeah, so she has 4 children, and her husband is a rancher. So as everybody knows, cowboy influence is such a big influence in the fashion industry right now. There she is. I'm sorry, I should have brought some visuals. So she was a blogger, so she used to write, and she's really hysterical. So she kind of just was a blogger and a chef, and she had 4 kids, so she was always making a lot of meals. So she started blogging, and I don't know the exact story, but she was in a cook-off challenge with Bobby Flay, and she won. So that kind of put her on the map. So then, kind of like a Martha Stewart, so now she's kind of like Walmart's Martha Stewart with all of her home goods. And then what happened is because the home goods business has been such a ginormous business that they wanted her to launch into apparel. So her apparel line is currently out at Walmart right now, but the last year, everything you see now is not my mark or my collection or my collaboration with the new teams. She kind of got thrown into it, and she kind of had to back into some things, and sometimes this happens. So my advice, if you guys ever want to launch your own line, take your time, do it right, launch it right once, because you get forced into things maybe that aren't you or that aren't brand right. So now she's going through a relaunch, and the relaunch is happening March 1st. So, but it's also challenging because say things she loves, we have to be conscious of price point. Like the opening price, they call it OPP, which is opening price point, is $19.99. So say, but where you get your value is a print. Like a little print will go like a long way. So we try to put like, and especially when she cooks in them. She has 15 million followers on social media, which is crazy.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, she has 15 million followers. She has a magazine, cooking shows, so on a monthly basis, she touches 50 million people. And the interesting thing is when when she has a launch on Walmart, like there's a huge spike. Like one time she almost like crashed the site.
Oh my gosh.
She has a fan page, they're so loyal to her, and you know what I think this all comes down to? I know, right? What I think is key about like brand building and DNA is that she's so authentic. So people always ask me, is this who she is? She is her authentic self. She has this nice little blended family. They're so beautiful. They wear her clothes. They go on family vacations together. They live on their ranch, so they show them ranching. They kind of show like their cowboy life. They're out doing karaoke and these different things. And I think people really, she has an adopted son, so people have really connected to her because she's just her authentic self, I guess is the best way to describe it.
That's great. That's the best kind of influencer, the ones that are super authentic, true to it.
For sure.
So in your current role, what does a typical week look like? And I always kind of say that in quotes because I don't think there is such a thing as a typical week in fashion, but what are you working on this week, for instance?
So this week we're developing, which is really nuts, spring concept and summer concept a year out. So we're developing for 2024.
Before you sold a garment.
Before we sold a garment, which is it's a huge position to take. But as you guys all know, once Runway Show comes out, you're probably thinking, how can you compare Runway to Walmart? But it is all a trickle-down effect. Like I've literally seen this now for 20 years, maybe a color, like maybe this green came down the runway. I mean, we've all seen the Devil Wears Prada.
I was going to say, that was the azure blue. I haven't shown it as much, but yeah. The azure blue model.
Exactly. So it just, it'll happen down a runway on a high-end look, then it hits moderate opening price point, and then what happens is people see it everywhere, and of course they have to have it. And everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to be relevant. It doesn't matter what type of garment you're buying. I think most people do want to look fashionable. So the runway definitely affects opening price point.
So you are
planning
ahead first next summer, spring summer, while you're also...
So we're actually working at 5 seasons on a time right now. So we're shooting we're shooting the looks for summer 23. Then we're working on production they're buying holiday right now. Then we're working on production, and we're also developing spring and summer. So it's every day we go in, it's a little bit of a different challenge, but we're, depending on what stage we are of the process for each season, that we kind of sit down on a weekly basis, kind of talk about what our due dates are, what tech packs we're releasing, what needs to be done as far as like artwork. We have a CAD artist. She helps like place prints or help rework prints. And then there's always another project that comes up. So for example, they'll approach us and say, hey, we want to do hats and belts, and somebody always comes to us, and then we have to learn to pause, pivot, like what's the pressing deadline, let's get that done. We definitely collaborate and brainstorm, like put our heads together and talk about like who can do what. I think in today's fashion industry too, it's not just about necessarily being an apparel designer or a merchandiser or a textile designer. Everybody really kind of needs to see the big picture and jump in and be able to like help the group any way they can to like get it done.
Yeah, that's great. And does Ree sign off on all of your...
Yes, that's a great question. So Ree is a micromanager, as she should be because her name's on it. So she signs off on every print, every color. So it's our job as a design team to present her color and concept and looks and silhouette. So we feed her these documents, we sketch, we show a vision. Like for example, this summer the theme is Farmstead Floral, which is about like festival dressing, going to concerts, backyard barbecues. It's like colorful, bright, with fringe, embroidery. We just show her all these ideas. We just sell her on the theme and the concept, or we ask her what's important to her. I know last summer she went to Mexico, so this summer, 2024, we're kind of inspired by Mexico and her trip to Cabo. Mm-hmm. So we try to put a spin on kind of her personal life and what inspires her. And she will sign off on every document. She writes us back, or we Zoom with her, but she's lovely and has a strong opinion and feedback.
That's great. How big is your team?
So we are only on the apparel side because we're still growing. We're only 4 people. We have a product development person. And one thing I didn't get to point out is that Walmart is based in Bentonville, Arkansas. So our team, Earthbound, is a whole support team. I think there's 50 people in Bentonville that the owner of Earthbound owns. His name is Jeff Cohen, in Bentonville. So he's a whole office there with a team of 50 people. And these people are they're merchandisers, they're product developers, and that is so they can go directly to Walmart, like on a day-to-day basis, and work like in tandem with them in person, because so much has been lost through Zoom, right? So it's so important to be able to, show up and collaborate with them and talk about the garments or the colors or.
And then you're not flying down there.
Exactly. So that's nice too. So we have a product development person. They help with the costing, the merchandising, the SKU plan, the SKU count. Then we have a CAD designer. She's in charge of all the prints, reworking the prints, kind of making or pulling out like a ditzy print out of the print so it all looks cohesive. And then we have a apparel designer. So she makes a lot of the tech packs. She sketches, but we all collaborate every day, basically saying like, I have this top, how's this print gonna look in it? And then at the end of the day, we have to put a bow around it and deliver this nice presentation to Ree, who sits there for like a week and digests the prints, the fabric, and gets back to us and like what she would wear, what she wants to stand for, and what she wants her brand DNA to look like.
That's great. Cool. What does an entry-level job look like at Earthbound in general, or on your team?
Sure. So basically most kids are, I shouldn't say kids, sorry, young adults, I apologize. I was there too, are fresh out of school, and most of them are just eager to get their feet wet. They either came from apparel, marketing, merchandising, and specifically for design. Specifically, it's you have to be able to have a nice sense of color, you have to have a nice hand to your sketches. I believe though, giving the most eager person the job, or anybody that has great ideas, I believe specifically as a design director, I can teach anybody how to do anything. As long as you have like a good attitude, you want to be there, and you want to learn.
That's great. Where is your favorite place to work through the years, and why? And you can exclude your current role, your previous roles.
Yeah, I know that's a loaded question. I have to say all of them. You know, looking back on it in hindsight, there's been so many gifts at each company. I do have to say my most recent one is my favorite. They're just a great company. They have a conscious mindset. They have like a good example is just a couple weeks ago. For the last year, all the employees were talking about it. They wanted to fine-tune their presentation skills. We're creatives, right? We're in this creative industry, and we present a lot to Walmart. So they brought in a guest speaker, and they're running courses. So they really care about the employees. And I've worked at some companies where it's just like, and I won't say which one it is, but pump out 50 tech packs a day, or pump out 60, and you lose the human connection. Like you lose touch with people, right?
For sure.
Like they think designers are just machines, or in your sales, whatever role you're in the fashion industry, and you have to kind of slow down and really talk to your people. And the owner specifically of our company, Jeff Cohen, he really listens to people. He has 4 kids that are also involved in the business, so he listens to them. Another cool thing that he did is we have a great work-life balance where we work in the city Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday through Friday, our Thursday and Friday, we all work remote. So he believed that coming out of the pandemic, people want this remote work-life balance, and he believes, and it's the truth, that people work just as hard at home when you give them the autonomy and the freedom to have creative freedom to get their job done. So we all really grind Monday through Wednesday, we collaborate, and then on Thursday, Friday, we do more kind of desk work, email follow-up, and we still have Zoom calls, but it's nice to all collaborate.
That's great. What has made someone a really amazing employee for you over the years? Like made someone really stand out as a great employee?
I think the number one thing is communication. It's just that I always say, any employer, any boss that you guys work for, nobody has that crystal ball. I know this sounds kind of silly, but if you have needs, or you're not getting something, or you need help, go up and talk to your professor, your teacher, whoever, and something can be cleared up in a second. You know what I mean? And that just helps you be the best designer, or merchandiser, or buyer. So I always think the best employees are people that just over-communicate. There's no silly questions. And I think the more you can communicate and understand, how different people like to learn, or teach, or lead, I think the better work collaboration you'll have.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, who's the best person you ever worked for? And what made them so great?
Sure. So I worked for this really dynamic man who was amazing. We just really hit it off. He had a great sense of humor. We had a lot of fun outside of the office, but he really respected me, and he took a big risk on me, and he kind of gave me autonomy to just kind of let me, this is when I was working for QVC for Rachel Zoe and the Kardashians, and he had his own line. He went to school in Paris and had his own fashion line, and he was on the Shopping Channel Canada, which was live TV, and one day his green card was expired and he couldn't go, and I came into the office one day, and I didn't have that much experience. He's like, you gotta go. I'm like, what do you mean I gotta go? He's like, you're going on live air tomorrow to present my product.
Oh my God.
I mean, I had no training, I barely knew the product. I had to study the product all night. It's a little bit nerve-wracking having a camera on you and having to know the garment, but he just really trusted me. And you know what I think it was? Just the fact that he said, to have somebody come up to you and say, I trust you. And I say this to my team today, I look at them after we have a conversation, I said, you got this. I have faith in you. I trust you, you can do this. And I think it's such a simple concept that him just verbally saying that, I think, made all the difference.
Oh, that's
Yeah. You'll see in your career that for some reason, sometimes creative people can't do that. I don't know why. Probably because it's a tough industry to be in, but encourage them to. Ask for feedback.
Yeah, yeah. You've worked with a lot of different retail partners, from Macy's to Walmart. You mentioned Nordstrom, QVC. What stands out to you? Like, what makes a good retail partner to be a partner with?
Sure. I think just first, start with conversation. Ask them what their needs are, whether they're looking for a dress collection. Always ask them maybe what didn't work in the past and how you can be there to help. And I think that, again, it just goes back to communication and finding out what works for them or how you can help grow their business. Every retail partner is different, and they're all looking for something different. It's not really this industry, because we're all creative. It's not one size fits all. And the more data and analytics that we're getting, everybody is pulling different information, right? So they can pull a chart 10 different ways. So really ask the right questions. And I think it's the ones that, and then as you ask them questions, they're going to come back to you and ask you what you think after you've asked, all the right questions, which I know you will.
Do you have a favorite mistake over the years that you really learned from and grew from?
Yes. So this is an interesting story. When I was at Republic Clothing Group, I was eager, and I'd been there for 5 years, and I was eager to work for another company, and I was ready to move on. So I casted my net in the fashion industry, and I found another job, almost doubling my salary. So I went and got the job, and I was willing to go to this other company. And then I went back to Republic, and they convinced me to stay. And I feel like that was my biggest regret in my career, because I should, looking at me, I should have gone. Because I think what happened is I had revealed, they talked to me about, how I just built this big business, why do I want to let it go? But I believe I went out and got more money for myself. I'm the one who got my job. And then they only wanted to keep me once I had this other offer. And then sure enough, the pandemic happened, and unfortunately they laid me off. And I think it's because I had shown all my cards. But I always say this, I think this is I want to tell people this because always look in your heart, and that ship had sailed, and I was ready to move on. And there's a reason why I did that. I should have left. Mm-hmm. But hindsight is 20/20, and people make mistakes. But
yeah, it's true.
You don't know what the future is gonna hold.
Well, and sometimes the devil is not as bad as the one you don't know. I will say I made a jump for the right reasons that you're listing, and it was my worst mistake. So you gotta really look at the company that you're talking about and figure out what.
Right. And I think it's hard because I really trusted my current boss at the time.
Yeah.
That she was going to make everything right. But the fact is she didn't at the time, so I don't know why I thought she would in the future.
Yeah. Well, all's well that ends well.
That's right. And all mistakes are good mistakes.
Yeah.
You learn from them and grow from them.
Totally. Yeah. How do you get yourself started on designing a collection? How do you find inspiration and kind of kick off?
Sure. Well, I think most importantly is know your brand DNA. So, for example, mine is the Pioneer Woman. She's this Western cowboy. It's this whole romance on the ranch. So obviously, looking at her mindset, I research out barbecues, carnivals, like different things that are happening on the ranch. What's popping up on the ranch as far as like flowers or where is she vacationing. So once you kind of find your concept or generate those ideas, then of course we go to runway and we look at all the shows that are showing florals or all the shows that are showing color. Now there's WGSN, Fashion Snoops, Pinterest. You just have some buzzwords that you Google search, and these ideas just kind of, no pun intended, blossom.
That's great.
And you work with your team, right? Like you ask them, like, well, what do you think about this brand or that brand, or how do you, one year there's a huge exhibit. I know you guys were all talking about visiting museums. When I was working in Catherine Malandrina, there was a big Martha Graham exhibit. So one of our deliveries, we named it Modern Dance, and it was about like Tool and kind of ballet influence, and everybody is always so influenced by the Met. I know Karl Lagerfeld, I think, is the Met this year, so I'm sure we're going to see a huge emergence again of, even now it's coming up, like Chanel tweed jackets are coming back in, but I think it's going to be even more so like in the next year.
Why are you passionate about design?
I don't know. I was always a creative person as a child. I was always coloring. I sewed. My mom was a home ec teacher. So I was always, I love to use my hands, so I love to be artistic and put things together. I think it's really rewarding to put a garment together. I know you guys are not just apparel, correct? Are you merchandising? Right, all different areas. It's a really rewarding industry because we're building something, right? We're all building something, whether you're working with your merchandiser, your designer, your salesperson. And at the end of the day, we all collaborate and put together something that's going to be on the floor or in a store or on e-com. And I think the reward is to see it sell, or see your product on the street when you see somebody wearing your stuff, or when it's in the airport. It's a really reward. It's a hard business, but it's also really rewarding. And I think that's what brings me passion.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned this kind of in passing before, but what is Earthbound doing to be a more sustainable company?
That's a great question. We have a label called Under the Canopy. So Under the Canopy is all organic and sustainable home bedding, towels, and then they have some loungewear, just a few pieces. They don't plan on really blowing out the apparel part of it, but it's really about towels and sheets. And then, again, it's called Under the Canopy. So it's all sustainably and sourced.
Yeah. Good step in our direction.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, I think it's hard to be completely sustainable, but, they're trying. And
Yeah.
now there's so many fabrics that are sustainable. The challenge is, as everybody knows, is that they're more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's hard when people want to be at a
Look at
sharp
food.
price. And what? Yeah, right. I know if eggs are going up, right?
Yeah, right.
And you have to think the retail consumer, especially at the mass market level, they don't necessarily know that. They don't understand that they're getting a better quality by
Right.
purchasing sustainable goods.
Yeah.
I do think the next generation is more conscious of that. I think that they're going to want to pay a little bit more money to know where it's coming from.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the connections that I wanted to make with the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire is also just that the owners of that factory were not indicted in the end because they weren't doing anything illegal. And the problem was that the industry hadn't caught up with the time. I mean, one would think that they knew that they were not human rights acts they were committing, they were doing things towards humans that was not right. But at the same time, they were breaking laws that had been set forth. And I think that we all, as a generation, are going to see this coming in the next few years, that people in charge need to tell us what the rules are, and then the companies can fall in line and be doing the right things. And we'll look back on that hopefully in a couple decades and say, I can't believe we weren't doing, putting sprinklers in the ceiling or whatever it may be for sustainability. So it's got to all catch up.
I know.
Every step's a good step in the right direction, I'd say.
I know, for sure. Well, it's just the building awareness.
Yeah. So we, as a class, the first day of class, we got together and we came up with capstone questions that we wanted to ask every guest.
I love that.
And the first one is, what advice do you have for yourself as a new graduate?
I guess my advice would be hit the ground running, ask questions, take initiative, kind of back to the first part of my kind of intro, and be ambitious and be brave and be your authentic self.
What is the most important thing you learned on your first job?
I guess to be brave. Be brave, ask questions. I know it's kind of all entwined, similar, but it's true. And just like if somebody asks you to do something or partner with you, and it's maybe out of your wheelhouse, take that risk. It's okay. I don't think people realize they don't know what their capabilities are until they try something that's out of their comfort zone. Because most people want to do something that they're used to doing or that they know they're really good at. Well, try something different.
The next question was, what do you hate about the fashion industry?
Okay, this is a great question, and this reminded me of the video you showed with mass market and opening price point. The Zara's, the Targets, the Walmart is the waste. So I know there's something like 90 billion tons of waste that is going into this industry, like or in the world. It's either buried or they burn it, which is really sad. And it's sad to think about future generations. And there has to be a solution. We have to be moving faster. I don't even know what the solution is because I feel like it's such a large issue.
Yeah.
So I guess keep vintage shopping and keep wearing the looks again and again. Just reinvent your look, wear your pieces, try to hold on to those pieces that you love and bring them back.
Yeah. And the last question, which maybe is the same to what you just said, but what do you feel like is the biggest macro trend that's happening in the fashion industry? The biggest thing that's going to shift in the next 5 years?
Sure. It's definitely gender fluid dressing. Everybody, which I think is actually a good thing for the waist in the garment industry, because it's great if men, women, anybody can wear it. I think that's great. I think that's the number one thing is fluidity in dressing, as well as, which you touched upon it earlier too, is women's and plus sizes. Right now, and they're calling it exclusivity in sizing. We all see on websites now, they'll show it on a missy model, they'll show it on a plus model. The average size of a woman right now is 18 plus. And it continues to grow. So I think that's going to be a huge trend is making sure that they look, that this size customer looks good because they're gonna be like the biggest client in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
For sure.
How are you launching this brand across sizes?
Yes, so we are in Plus, and our company also owns a plus size brand called Terra and Sky. So we own Time and True, which is like the Missy market. We own Terra and Sky, which is Plus. And the interesting thing about the plus size customer is she also, we're learning, is not loyal. So she doesn't, she will, like, I feel like when I was growing up, I'd find a brand that would fit and I would keep going back there, but everybody just wants the best deal. And then we're also learning that she takes a lot of risks and chances. Like you would think that maybe she would want to be in something a little bit more covered up, but it's not. We're finding that she's more sexy, she wants to show more skin, she wants to close tighter. So these are things we're learning, and I think it's important to share.
Yeah. It's great. Well, that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Carol. I appreciate being here.
I do want to turn it over to everyone else. See what questions are out there.
All right. Wow, I'm surprised. Nobody ever. I'll just go in order. Okay.
Okay. I had actually written this down. I was doing a little bit of research on you. But what do you think the benefits, or I'd say the pros and cons of a larger team versus a smaller direct team?
I think that is a great question. I'm glad you brought this up. So when I was at Macy's, I think I was running like a team of 12 people. And when I was younger, I wanted to work with more people. And now that I have a small team, I think it's a lot because when you're running a team of 12 people, everybody rightfully so has personal needs, right? So when I was running this large team, I felt like I was dealing with more people's personal needs and requests and actually having the time to develop people in their careers. So now that I have a small team, I love that I can, obviously I help them with their, whatever their personal requests are too, but I have the time to dedicate them to growing their career or having the time to sit down with them and be like, what are you interested in? What area do you want to be in? Where do you want to be a bottoms designer? Do you want to be a tops designer? Do you want to stay in design? Do you want to be in merchandising? And the small team is just really nice because you can collaborate more. Sometimes with 12 people on your team, the day is so short and the weeks are so short, not everybody has time to collaborate, or I don't have time to work with all of them, or even hear their feedback sometimes with the larger team. And sometimes larger teams can be like a runaway train, right? There's just sometimes too many ideas. It's nice to be able to like rein it in.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yes, so you also mentioned that you think you can teach the young adult everything if they have talked to them. So do you think it is more important to have a good personality or to have a strong ability to work in the fashion industry?
I would think that's you guys all have great questions. I think your ability, at the end of the day, we're running a business, so ability is number one. I think it's best to, fine tune your skills at FIT or through internships, but I'm definitely a big proponent of a great personality, and the personality doesn't have to be like my personality. I just like people that are engaged or that have different personalities, but definitely I think skills is number one.
Spend a lot of time with these people all day long,
Yeah.
so you kind of want to like them.
But I always say too, when I'm hiring people, and this is why I encourage people to speak up in an interview process, because I don't want somebody that has the same opinion as me. I want somebody that has like a different perspective, that can sit down across from me and say, well, did you think about that? I don't want them to think the exact same thing I'm thinking, or just bring a different perspective on color or print or kind of younger trends or what people should be going after or what they see in the market. So don't be afraid to speak up. You're welcome. Thank you. Good question.
Hello.
Hi.
You touched on this topic a little bit earlier, but I want more information.
Sure.
Since you have so much experience within the apparel business, how has it changed since the onset of COVID-19, and where do you see it evolving into?
That's another great question. So I'm sure, as everybody knows, when COVID hit, sweatpants ruled, right? Like everybody was in sweatpants. Every brand went after athleisure, and I think it was almost too oversaturated, right? So every brand went after athleisure, and I think people are still wearing athleisure, but now 3 years later, people want to be dressed up again. I think people want a reason to wear, but I think the good news, back to the whole thrifting, I think people are going back through their closet, like giving their closet a second life, which is great because we don't want more waste, as I kind of touched upon earlier. Yes.
You mentioned it a little bit ago, but how like the next collection may be like Mexico inspired. Like how does your team like navigate that, walking like a fine line between like cultural appropriation and like also like being inspired by like a vacation? Like how do y'all navigate?
That is, we are very conscious of that. That's a great question, especially one thing I didn't mention once you guys do some more research about the Pioneer Woman, if you have any interest, her husband is she is one of the largest landowners in the United States. So they're very conscious of their footprint and what was on the land before them. And as you're mentioning about Mexico, we are very conscious about, as much as we can be, blurring cultural lines, right? So we always try to then be inspired by like color or flowers. Sometimes there's always a customer who writes in and says something, but especially in the mass market level, we are very conscious. It is hard, but we have a leadership team. Walmart has a leadership team, and we all look at every little detail, like where's like kind of the history of this motif, or even something as simple as a paisley has a historical influence. So we really are conscious of every little, which can be hard, but that's why we pretty much stick to florals.
Yeah.
We try to play it. You want to play it safe. You don't want to offend anybody or any culture.
I had one of the founders for Faraday in last spring semester,
nice.
and they actually have gone so far as to only buy indigenous people's prints
Wow.
that they recreate. Like their team does not actually create any Navajo-inspired prints,
It's authentic?
as we've always called them, which is, it's authentic. They always work with different brands, and hopefully more people will know that as time goes on. But sticking with florals probably safe bet too.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is everybody's wearing florals now too. Men, women, boys. We even have like mommy and me looks, and we're developing floral printed shirts for the boys, and so it's been fun.
Yeah.
That is a great point. Very valid.
I had a question about like picking like Reed Drummond. I feel like influencer culture is like so volatile these days. How do like brands navigate that? Like we see what happened with like Kanye and Adidas, and like one wrong tweet and like you can just be canceled, and that would be like the end of the brand.
So we say it was one wrong.
No. I mean like in other.
But it's risky. It's risky for
like how do brands deal with that kind of risk?
I can't specifically speak for Reed, but following her, I can say that she's very conscious about not posting anything political, not posting anything to the native land, kind of as we were talking about earlier. All of her posts are just kind of like happy, enlightening. She kind of talks about funny things in her personal life, but she's very conscious of like not crossing a certain line, which you'll see if you follow her on Instagram and kind of like watch her. I don't have all the answers because I do know once you put yourself out there, you're prone to getting negative feedback. And sometimes she does too, but I always believe that you can't really feed into it, you know what I mean? And most people kind of forget a week later. Something else will come up and there'll be somebody else on the Grammys or something that happened that will kind of shine light on something new.
Yeah. Sorry, just to follow up with that, like speaking about things like changing really fast, how do you like predict trends for like so far in the future? Because you mentioned you're working on like stuff for 2024, and like especially in today's world, like the trends are changing like every other month or something. So
That's a good question. I know I keep saying that's a good question, but that is another good question. I think a good way to put it is look at what all your classmates are wearing. One good way I'll give you a good example is like I remember when there was all these like keyhole details showing, so like a lot of skin was showing, and then the next new thing was off the shoulder, like completely, cold shoulder. So you can kind of see things evolve, if you kind of have that creative eye, whether it's like sweatshirts or branding, or there was a while where like branding was on all sweatshirts, and now sweatshirts are more cleaned up, you know what I mean? It's just kind of, you just have to keep your eyes open and kind of take some notes, and there's no like right answer to it. It's really just kind of taking like a mental note and getting online and following people and seeing what people are going after. But it is hard to predict a year from now. So that's what happened during COVID. People were sitting on all this inventory and nobody wanted that product, right? If everybody wanted to be in sweatpants, people were stuck with more dressy dresses, blouses, and things that weren't selling at the time.
As an FIT student, you have access to a number of forecasting sites that a lot of industry designers use. I don't know if you have any in particular that you love, but WGSN, Fashion Snoops. If you go through the library database, has anyone in the room used any of these fashion forecasting sites? Yeah. Take advantage of them while you're here, because when you get out there, if your company's not paying for them, they'll be a lot harder to access. But there are people who dedicate their lives to being forecasters and helping to influence ideas. But you know your customer better too, so you have to pick out the ones within the forecast that.
Yeah, and I have to say, we love WGSN and Fashion Snoops, but the interesting thing is sometimes they're wrong too. It's funny because you guys are all shaking your heads. We're all, and this is the hardest thing. So for example, we're developing spring 24 right now. but our product for spring 23 doesn't hit till March 1st. But we have to get those tech packs out and release all the product. So as soon as we get selling in those first 2 weeks of March, we have to pivot quickly because we don't necessarily, we're taking an educated guess that based on like analytics, color selling, print selling, we're just making like logical guesses as well as offering her newness because we know she doesn't want to buy the same top and the same print. You know, so you're trying to formulate a recipe.
It's science.
Yes, go ahead.
What is something you're most proud of throughout your career?
Great question.
You know, something I'm most proud of in my career is definitely all the people that I've helped mentor and inspired. I've had, and I'm not just tooting my own horn, but I've had quite a few people come up to me and say like, you know, thank you so much for being such a great boss for me. Thank you for believing in me. And I think it's because I have had, not at Earthbound, but I've had some horrible bosses that were so mean, and I always told myself like, I'm never gonna do that. I'm always gonna try to help inspire people. I'm not saying my way is the right way, but I just believe in being nice to people. You know, you get more honey with, you get more bees with honey, you know? And,
Yeah.
And I'm most proud, a lot of these young people still call me, say they have an interview, I try to help coach them through it. I say like, okay, do your research, ask some questions, whoever they're interviewing for, I really try to help them. Yes, go ahead.
Kind of going off of that, you know, the fashion industry is known as like this cutthroat, volatile place, but I feel like, you know, people in my generation are trying to push for like more kindness, you know, more consciousness. Are you like seeing that like, you know, from like our generation, or is it like kind of going to the above generations now because we're incoming and we don't want to deal with people who are older and ruder than us?
I think that
Nice terms.
I think that leaders that care have noticed the kindness, you know what I mean, because they were brought up like in a different type of industry where people were not as nice and maybe a little bit more cutthroat, and they want to, look, you guys are the future, right? Like this is the next generation and you have to adapt. Like this is the way our owner of our current company is. He listens to the young generation. He's like, obviously he's not gonna say take every day off, work 5 days a week from home, but he's listening, he's flexible, and kindness does go a long way. And I think, who wouldn't want to be kind? You know what I mean? I would much rather work with somebody that's kind, or definitely when I work with suppliers and merchants and all the different vendors, we always call the people, we call everybody back, but the people that are kind we want to continue to work with, right? We don't want to work with the difficult people. Sometimes we have to, but I think you get more attention that way, and people are definitely going to call. And I think being kind, you should offer ideas or ways in your company or wherever you end up. I think it's one thing to say it, like let's all just be kind, but give them examples, right? Like give them examples how they can help be kind, or ways they can implement processes in the company, maybe to get people to be more kind or work together. It's hard though, it's not easy. Have you found yourself in a bad
Oh, no.
company where
I'm
people
just,
were not
I'm
nice?
just saying because like, you know, like Devil Wears Prada, like,
Yeah.
you know, Meryl Streep is like, you know, dragon, whatever.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I felt like growing up, like I was like, oh, like I want to do fashion, but like I don't want her as my boss.
Yeah.
Like I want someone like Anne Hathaway as my boss because, you know, she's not a dragon.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just wanted to get it like another perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having this conversation with Chrissy. She's going to be one of your guest speakers in a couple weeks. She told me that she wanted to get into children's wear because people were so much nicer in children's wear. And I said to her, I didn't even think of that. I should have gone into children's wear.
Just kidding, we're gonna come to with
Oh,
you.
yeah?
That's when we met. No, they were not so nice. That's a whole other story.
But in general, kindness attracts kindness, right? So you're going to find people that are kind, that are willing to help each other to get, because we all have the common goal, right? It's a business. We're all trying to make money, and we all want to help each other.
Well, and I was thinking about what you were saying too. You're most proud of your mentoring, and you've like, you know, sowed all these seeds, and that comes back to you, because then when you want to hire someone, you go back to your, you know, previous employee and say, hey, you got anyone good, and they'll toss you a good name, and it all kind of flows back around as good people bring good people.
Yeah, it's like being a farmer. Back to the pioneer woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Congrats on everything you've done this far. Like,
Oh, well,
you seem
thank
like
you.
you really enjoyed what you've done.
I appreciate that.
But
That's kind of you.
how do you balance that with home? Because we all understand this industry, and it's like hours are crazy. Like there are weeks that you don't know what time you're getting home, and like at least my family doesn't understand what we do. Like they watch, they're like, oh, you were Andy yesterday. I'm like, yes, it was Andy all week. How have you balanced home life and work life?
Sure, I have to say when I was younger, it wasn't easy. I was, working at my job till like, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, and I was entry level assistant, and at the time, you would not get paid more. Now, that's against the law. You get paid for every hour that you work, especially at an assistant level, but unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way, and then as you get older, I think you have to just set boundaries. You have to say, like, you have to know when you're done. I don't think people are being productive after 6 o'clock at night anyway. I think people get most of their productive work done in the morning. You come in with like maybe a short list, what's the most important thing on your list. But towards the end of the day, people are spent. It's long days, it's a lot of like running around the office and shifting gears between emails and sketching or merchandising a showroom. And again, I know that sounds a little cliche, but you have to just set boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that comes with paying dues first. Like maybe sometimes you have to work really hard for a couple weeks or months and kind of tell your boss or your manager, remind them what your successes were, and remind them that you're going to get the job done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want burnout.
Yeah.
I know that's a whole nother
Yeah.
class, right?
Yeah, that should be enough. But I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm on a different side of it than you, but I think that the way that it was up until 2020 has shifted quite a bit because of the pandemic. One of the best silver linings that's come out of this thing is the idea of you change your desk is no longer there. Kind of that idea has been like shattered because a lot of leaders saw that people can be just as productive completely from home, let alone flexible a little bit from home. And being home doesn't mean you're not working. It means that you have the time to get your laundry done or take 2 hours back to your day not eating, things like that. So I don't know if you feel like it's been a lot easier since then.
It definitely has been. I think it's hard too because I think some people that were only working from home also became a little burnout, and they wanted some interaction again. They for 2 years started looking for other jobs because they were just working from home and wanted to work with people again, like in person. So it's tricky.
Yeah.
None of it's easy, but you can do it.
Yeah.
I also have a question about, because we were talking about that, the collection that you would have to have, like, for that 24 collection and, trends and everything, that, like, how much room is there for error, whether that comes in, like, production, a quality control issue, like, how much time do you have to recuperate, and how do you, like, navigate that with a small team versus
Well, production takes about 6 months, so at that point, we say like everything's pretty much baked. So at that point, we pretty much say, we've all kind of held hands together, we all made decisions. Maybe we put in 30% bestsellers. We try to want to diversify, right? Like, so we'll have bestsellers, we'll have some pieces that are, or we used to use this acronym, RUN, which is repeat, update, new. So give her the repeat in new colors. Update, maybe if she loves a nice sleeve, we give her a newness in a sleeve. And then kind of what's the new silhouette? Where are we pushing her? But obviously the pyramid is, the fashion is less. You always want to bank on the sure thing.
But also, and if I was speaking out of turn about the way that you do things, typically you commit to the fabric, and then a little, like you kind of have time to then commit to the color, and then you have a little time to commit to the body. So you have each of these touch points where you can kind of tweak and course correct. But
that's a great point that you brought up.
Yeah.
So sometimes we own the fabric. Say we'll own 50,000 yards of fabric, and like say March 1st, if something bombs, we try to change the silhouette. Like maybe she didn't like the low neckline, or maybe she wanted more coverage, or maybe a sleeve she wasn't responding to. So the name of the game is definitely pivot up, and we are pivoting up until the last minute. But other times we feel good about what we're offering, and we just are taking an educated risk, I guess is the best way to describe it.
is there one more hand over here?
What are some challenges that you face in your job? It seems like you do so much.
Every day is a challenge, and I am a parent of 2, and I think that has really taught me, just take a deep breath, be flexible, pause, you don't need to answer right away, kind of analyze the situation, ask questions, and you don't have to have the answer. If there is a challenge that comes up, you can speak to somebody else, or talk to other people. Challenges are, everybody has a personal challenge, work challenges. There's a challenge even getting to work or to an event, you just have to take a deep breath and keep moving forward to the best you can. But it's not all easy, it's hard work.
Pause and proceed.
You know, I know this sounds kind of silly, but I watched Lady Gaga perform once, and then she gave a speech, and she said, you know, because everybody looks at Lady Gaga, she makes it look so easy, the costumes, the costume changes, the performance. She said, this is hard work. She goes, I don't want anybody to ever think that this is easy. So just remember that about like anything that you do. I appreciate that she was so humble, because most celebrities just go up there and say like, oh, you know, great performance, and well, thank you. You know, she was really honest about how hard it was. She said she took a keyboard up and down all over the city, would play for anybody. Same thing in this industry, you just gotta keep trying, you know? And if something doesn't work, like try something else or try a different approach. Don't just keep doing the same thing again and again if it's not working.
Any other questions out there? Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for joining
for
us
having me
today.
here,
It was
Lauren.
so great.
Thank
Wish you the best of luck
Oh,
with the
thank
launch
you.
too. It's
Thank
exciting.
you.
It's
Thanks.
always
Thanks. I
jitters
appreciate
right
it.
before it happens.
Thank you, and please reach out if you guys need anything. My social media is not exciting, but find me on LinkedIn.
If you have about 5 minutes, maybe if anyone has a question.
Yeah,
I'm happy to
yeah.
jump in.
No, I'm happy if anybody has any other questions.